This film tells the story of a warrior with a magical horn who possesses extraordinary abilities to learn kung fu moves with just one look. The film begins with a gripping war between the Clantian and the royal troops. This war unfolds in an extraordinary manner as the Tian clan is known to be the most powerful group in the region. The Qing dynasty boasts thousands of soldiers, known as God's warriors, and it is said that this clan controls the Beijing Zili and Shandong areas. Amidst the thousands of God's warriors, there is one peculiar soldier named Lucan. He is a talented young soldier who has mastered numerous kung fu techniques. However, Lucan has a peculiar physical feature: a small set of horns on his head. Surprisingly, these horns do not hinder him. In fact, when he squeezes them, Lucan undergoes a transformation that enhances his abilities before he continues fighting. Let me explain why Lucan has horns. 18 years ago, Lucan was born in a very unusual manner, unlike conventional babies. While other babies typically come out slowly, Lucan shot out like a rocket. Due to his abnormal birth, Lucan has been ostracized since childhood, even by his own father. As an official in the region, his father felt ashamed to have a strange child like Lucan. Fortunately, Lucan's mother loved him dearly. In the winter, a young Lucan was playing in the town square when he accidentally witnessed a martial arts performance. He was astounded by the kung fu moves demonstrated. While Lucan enjoyed practicing his kung fu moves, a group of kids stole his food. Lucan chased after them, but unfortunately the kids started bullying him and mocking the small horns on his head. Shortly after, Lucan fell unconscious. He was then rescued by the martial arts expert who had performed earlier. Surprisingly, Lucan's strength allowed him to counter the expert's attempts to separate them, despite having never learned kung fu before. However, Lucan lost consciousness again soon after. Meanwhile, Lucan's mother was caught stealing money from her husband, who refused to provide any support for their child. As a result, Lucan's stepfather subjected him to cruel treatment and expelled him from the house. From that day on, Lucan and his mother lived in poverty. One day, Lucan encountered the martial arts master he had seen before, known as Teacher Zhao. The teacher explained that the horn Lucan possessed was a gift called the three-flower crown. It was said that this horn was only bestowed upon selected geniuses by God, enabling them to master any martial art with just one look. Teacher Zhao saw great potential in Lucan and intended to pass on his knowledge to him, believing that Lucan had the potential to become the strongest kung fu expert in mainland China. Lucan's mother, before passing away, expressed her happiness for him. With her last breath, she urged Lucan to pay his respects and then embark on a journey with Teacher Zhao to learn martial arts. 10 years later, Lucan was chosen to be one of God's soldiers, participating in the war against the royal troops. It was finally revealed that Teacher Zhao was the supreme commander of the Clantianli, a legendary kung fu expert in the Qing dynasty. For the past 10 years, Teacher Zhao had been posing as someone else to recruit young individuals with potential to become God's soldiers. However, in this war, their troops found themselves being cornered by enemy attacks. Consequently, Teacher Zhao ordered one of his soldiers to hit Lucan's horn, triggering Lucan's transformation into power mode. Although Lucan succeeded in defeating the enemy troops, the use of the three-flower crown horn had a side effect. It caused Lucan to faint. Therefore, Lucan is immediately rushed to the treatment tent to be treated by a healer named Uncle Dong. However, this actually contradicts what Guru Zhao said, who mentioned that Lucan's strength would increase if he engaged in frequent fights, particularly when utilizing his Sakti horn. Uncle Dong disagrees with this perspective, as he believes it would only endanger Lucan's life. Furthermore, he suggests that Lucan learned martial arts from Chen Yang's family to fully harness the potential of his horns and inner strength. Meanwhile, teacher Zhao overhears the conversation and feels that Uncle Dong is attempting to take Lucan away from him. This leads to an argument between them. And unexpectedly, Uncle Dong, who is skilled in martial arts from the Chen family, easily defeats teacher Zhao. That night, Clan Tianli takes a rest before resuming the war. Suddenly, the royal troops launch a surprise attack, prompting Lucan to leave the tent immediately and rescue his friends. To his shock, he discovers that Uncle Dong has collapsed after being struck by Mia's arrow, which is lodged in his back and prevents him from regenerating. Before passing away, Uncle Dong advises Lucan to study with a martial arts expert named Chen, a member of the Chen family. He warns that without proper training, Lucan will be unable to control his horns and face a fatal outcome. Shortly after, the entire Tianli army is massacred. Fortunately, Lucan manages to save himself from the slaughter and swiftly seeks out Inagu, a resident of a remote village. After a challenging journey that involves climbing mountains and traversing valleys like a skilled ninja, Lucan finally arrives at the destination. Upon arrival, Lucan witnesses an unusual sight, a man meditating upside down in a tree. In short, he approaches the villagers and inquires about the address of Teacher Chen's house. Strangely, the residents inform him that Kung Fu Chen is not taught to outsiders like Lucan. As he grapples with confusion, a woman named Chen Yunyang alights from a passing car and inquires about Lucan's condition. Chen Yunyang, as it turns out, is Teacher Chen's biological daughter. She is accompanied by her prospective fiancé named Fang, whom we can refer to as Samidi. Lucan desires to approach Yunyang, but he discovers that they have already departed. Later, we are introduced to two of Yunyang's older brothers, who engage in gossip about Samida. According to them, Samidi is regarded as the village's most intelligent individual due to his frequent consumption and his expertise in engine mechanics. His ability to create his own car engine, acquired through overseas studies, has garnered recognition. However, despite his intelligence, Samidi faces disapproval from the villagers for his excessive adoption of Western culture. Even Yunyang's sister, who happens to be Samidi's girlfriend's sister, holds a negative opinion of him. One night, a village meeting takes place at the village hall. During the gathering, the residents discuss the construction of a railroad to connect their location with neighboring villages. It is Samidi who proposes this development. As the residents assemble at the village hall, Samidi promptly presents his plan to the attendees. However, they exhibit disinterest and voice objections, primarily due to concerns that the railway would require a substantial amount of land, potentially displacing residents' food sources and housing. Hearing this, Samidi tried to convince them by showing off the electric lights he had created. However, in the end, the residents immediately went home, and several people looked down on Samidi because he had gone all the way to study abroad, but failed to make a lamp. The next day, Uni was the one who was confused, as she was doing her routine of concocting herbal medicine for Kenker rice. But not long after Lucan came to Yunyang, Yunyang thought that he came because he was sick after being hit by Samidi's car a few days ago. Therefore, Yunyang immediately gave him money as medical expenses. But Lucan's goal was to learn self-defense from Yunyang's father. Hearing that, Yunyang said that her father's precious knowledge would only be taught to natives of the village. But because Lucan remained persistent, the woman finally lied to him by saying that her father was behind the mountain, even though she actually wanted to expel Lucan from the village. A few moments later, Lucan returned to Yunyang's house feeling disappointed because he had been deceived by a fake address. Yunyang was surprised by the speed of Lucan's feet because it usually takes up to 3 days to reach the mountain. Here, Lucan asked again where Teacher Chen was, but Yunyang was too lazy to answer and chose to leave. But Lucan asked continuously until finally, the two of them had a verbal argument. Thanks to the Chen Yunyang family's martial arts skills, they managed to throw Lucan from the top floor until the man fainted. But at the same time, Yunyang also felt guilty towards him. Not long after, Lucan woke up and his body was tied upside down. Moreover, there was a man in front of him whom he didn't know. Apparently, he was a laborer and a healer named Uncle Young. Uncle Young deliberately hung Lucan's body so that his blood flow would return smoothly after treatment. Lucan asked Uncle Young if he could teach him the Chen family kung fu. But unfortunately, Uncle Young is just a laborer who doesn't know kung fu. However, unexpectedly, Uncle Young actually knows about the 3 crown flowers. Then Uncle Young advises Lucan to look for a doctor because his wounds are getting worse and his life is in danger. One night, Samedi is seen contemplating his failure. He was distraught, and by his side there was Yunyang, who accompanied him while playing Samedi's romantic music. She then confessed that she was very annoyed and sad with the attitude of the villagers who rejected the plan to build the railroad, even though he had promised the governor to complete the construction of the railroad in 10 days. Artemis heard that Yuni was the one who provided a solution so that the construction of the railroad could proceed, and the solution was to get married. If Samedi wanted to marry her, then the Chen family would help him, especially since his family were respected people. So getting permission to build the railroad would not be difficult. However, Samedi refused because he was studying abroad to become an engineer and didn't want to be underestimated by Yunyang's brothers. The next day, Yunyang went to the post office and intended to send a letter to Samedi so that he wouldn't leave because he was like Manun. Also, the engagement couldn't be postponed any longer. But suddenly, she was taken aback because Lucan came again and asked to be taught kung fu from Yunyang's Chen family, which was taught by her father with gentle movements but deadly at the same time. Meanwhile, Samedi was being heavily evaluated by the governor because he had failed to persuade the villagers to build a railroad, even though he had spent a lot of money. However, Samedi didn't give up and asked for help from a train consultant named Claire, who would help Samedi realize the construction of the railroad. However, the governor doubted that Claire's presence would be able to help the process of building the railroad. Not only that, Samedi and Claire have also prepared a giant tank made with the best machines of its time. So the plan is that they will excavate the village with this object. The next day, Lucan sits pensively in the market, and suddenly he remembers the message his mother said before she died, which was that he must always do his best in everything. Thanks to the advice from his late mother, Lucan regains his enthusiasm and decides to re-enter the village, even though Yunyang had chased him away so he wouldn't be caught entering through the gate while covering his body with a thatched roof. But all the residents there try to tackle him, even small children. A child joins in tackling Lucan with his extraordinary martial arts skills. Normally, after being beaten by Bokchul Sakti, Lucan still has to wrestle with other villagers, but again, he fails to beat them. Then, the next day, Lucan imitates all the moves belonging to the villagers, starting from Yunyang, Bokchul, and other residents, because as we know, he has the ability to learn Kung Fu just by watching the movements once. Then, Lucan asks Uncle Leong for advice so he can go back inside, and the uncle advises him to imitate every opponent's movements. That way, he can definitely beat them that day. Finally, Lucan tries to enter the village again, but here he has to fight around with a tofu trader who challenges him to destroy the tofu in his hand. If Lucan can do that, then he can enter the village again. Without thinking, Lucan lunges forward and immediately Unfortunately, the traitor knew he was too strong for Lucan, but when he fell, Lucan received advice from Uncle Leong to copy all the opponent's movements, as he suggested earlier. And it turned out that this method was successful in making the traitor know the difficulties. Even though he won, Lucan remained humble. He even apologized to the tofu seller for dropping his tofu. After that, Lucan ran around the village, then climbed to a tower, shouting to thank Uncle Leong for helping him. But not long after, he felt dizzy and finally fainted due to absorbing too many kung fu moves. While Lucan was unconscious, the village was suddenly attacked by Samedi, who wanted to evict the residents' houses with his sophisticated tank, which was considered a monster by the local residents. After reading Governor Samedi's order, CL started to evict houses. The residents were merciless when they saw that. Yunyang was very disappointed with Samedi, who had the heart to evict his own village. She then asked Chamet to stop the eviction, and Samedi, who still liked Yunyang, was finally forced to resign. After they went to Yunyang to meet her brother and do something so that the residents could live in peace. But the village officials have given up, and the only person who can solve this problem is Teacher Chen, their own father. But the next day, Samedi and the foreigners came back to force the residents to work hard. They were ordered to build rails and fill in materials, burning tanks. What's worse, the villagers were manhandled by white Songung soldiers who looked down on them.
Claire, 远离贫穷和愚昧。
我不关心这些，我从他的眼神看得出来，他真的很在乎你。
我有自己的。
At the same time, Lucan finally wakes up from his fainting, and once again, the person who saves him is Uncle Leong. Here, the uncle tells him that the village is in chaos because of the arrival of Caucasian soldiers who want to build a railroad to carry out their colonial mission. Hearing this, Lucan is afraid because he has not had time to learn Kung Fu with the Chen family. Uncle Leong, who feels sorry for Lucan, finally makes a strategy to stop Samedi at CAS. That evening, CL is seen preparing to go back to his country because Samedi preferred Yunyang, but Jamie tries to stop him by saying that he actually loves Claire. They don't realize that Yunyang is peeking at them from the roof. And when they are almost there, Yunyang immediately comes in and stops them both with a disappointed look in her eyes. But at the same time, Yunyang quietly takes the usage book of the tank. The next day, Yunyang meets a postman carrying a tank usage book that contains a guide on how to control it. She wants to ask the postman to translate the contents, which are written in English. On the other hand, Lucan has just finished observing the tank. Samedi CS then draws the shape of the machine so that Uncle Leong can get a clear picture of the machine. After that, Uncle immediately explains his next plan. Without waiting any longer, Lucan infiltrated the tank. But when he was inside, he was discovered by the foreign soldiers. Without thinking twice, Lucan immediately used his kung fu moves to fight back. He successfully overthrew them all. Luckily, Yunyang arrived just in time to save Lucan. They worked together to stop the tank's engine, armed with a guidebook that had been translated by the postman. However, one of the surviving white soldiers pressed the emergency alarm, and everyone started hunting for Lucan and Yunyang. Meanwhile, Samedi and Claire suddenly arrived to stop Lucan and Yunyang. Samedi threatened Yunyang, saying that if she stopped the engine, he would become her enemy. However, Yunyang didn't care about his threats and immediately destroyed the engine. As a result of the tank explosion, there were many casualties, especially among the soldiers who were trapped inside. Unfortunately, Claire was severely injured and appeared to be dying from a pierced stomach. On the other hand, Lucan and Yunyang managed to escape safely. They went to the village hall to announce that the giant tank had been destroyed, and they were hailed as village heroes. However, Lucan didn't seek praise because his goal was to learn kung fu from Teacher Chen. At that moment, Uncle Leong appeared with a different appearance, revealing himself to be the real Teacher Chen. He had been disguised as an ordinary worker to secretly teach Lucan kung fu. After explaining everything, Teacher Chen told the residents to prepare for war, as he believed that Samedi and his allies would seek revenge. Each villager prepared their weapons and took their positions. Teacher Chen would act as the general, overseeing the battle from the top of the tower. Before the war began, Teacher Chen urged the villagers not to kill the enemy, but rather to drive them away and give warnings. Samedi and his fully armed troops arrived at the village, but were surprised to find it eerily quiet. Suddenly, the women attacked them with fruits, causing chaos and confusion among the soldiers. The soldiers were overwhelmed by the fruit attacks, which caused injuries. Yunyang used her kung fu moves to defeat some of the soldiers, and Lucan joined the scuffle. However, Lucan was shot and fell to the ground, angering Teacher Chen. Teacher Chen intervened and easily defeated the enemy troops, using his spear and bare hands. With the enemy driven out of the village, a new problem arose. Lucan faced the possibility of being sentenced to death for learning the Chen family kung fu, which was not supposed to be taught to outsiders. However, there was a way to avoid his execution. Lucan could marry Yunyang and become a resident of the village. Yunyang fell silent, realizing her growing admiration and love for Lucan. Meanwhile, Samedi was imprisoned by the governor as he was no longer useful. A few days later, the village celebrated the wedding of Lucan and Yunyang. However, at the end of the film, two mysterious warriors were shown planning to break into the village, and the foreign soldiers were preparing to take revenge on Teacher Chen and his followers. The film ended on a cliffhanger, leaving the story open for a continuation. Thanks for watching this recap. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, and don't forget to comment below and tell me what movie you want me to recap next.